Global household debt is on the rise, and that is simply because it's becoming much more increasingly easier for people to spend or to take on loans to purchase items that are considered liabilities and not assets, in that these are things that are likely to take money subsequently out of their pocket as opposed to bringing money into their pocket. And so in today's video, we'll be looking at the 7 ways that you can actually take advantage of things that are happening in the economy, or several economic measures that you can actually adopt in order to steer yourself towards a financial freedom status after 6 months. And so if you're new here, my name is Nana. I hold a master's degree in business finance, and on this channel we discuss everything personal finance and personal development. But before we go into the measures, what you need to know is that according to research, 8% has been added onto the global household debt, which simply means that hundreds of millions of people worldwide are now living paycheck to paycheck, in that they don't have anything left at the end of the month to save or to invest. And that is why this topic is extremely important for us to discuss. And so without further ado, we go to the first thing that you need to do, and that is to try as much as possible and then ascertain how much you actually owe. So more often than not, what people do is that they don't even sit down to go through their finances. And that stems from one psychological effect known as the ostrich effect. So what you need to do is to sit down and then confront the problem. And then more importantly, accept the fact that this is something that is more likely to stop you from the attainment of several other goals along the line. And so the best way to actually solve the problem is to actually acknowledge the problem and then get to know exactly how much you owe. The easiest way to get this done is to actually look at your statements from either your credit card statement or even your bank statement. That would actually reflect the amount of money that you owe, and that also gives you heads up as to how you can subsequently tackle the money and to pay it off and then become financially free. After getting to know how much you owe, the next thing that you need to do is to draw a budget. And more often than not, when I talk about budgeting, people tend to feel like, but this is my money, why should I feel restricted when it comes to the expenses? Now, a budget is not meant to place any restraint on you financially. As opposed to that, what it ensures is that the discipline and then the right motivation, which is required for you to actually end up paying your debt and to becoming financially free. The easiest way for you to draft a budget is to first of all sit down and then think about how much is coming in the form of income at the end of the month, and then what is being spent on at the end of the month. Now, knowing these two also helps you to balance out your income as against your expenditure, and that is one of the surest ways for you to effectively and efficiently draw a budget. And the next step after that is to resort to the 50-30-20 rule, which simply says that 50% of your income should be spent on your basic needs, 30% should be spent on your wants, and then the 20% in this case can go into actually saving or settling debt in order for you to see that you become financially free at the end of the 6 months period. This brings us to the third technique, and that is the debt snowball method. So the snowball method simply says that you have to settle smaller debts and then pay the bare minimum on the bigger loans. What that simply does is that it helps you to ensure the discipline and the motivation to face your debt and then subsequently steer yourself towards becoming financially free. Now, what you need to do is to sit down and then know every single debt that you hold, and then try as much as possible to itemize them out in order of ascension, in that you list the smaller loans first and then you try to focus on them whilst paying the bare minimum or the minimum payment on the bigger ones. And that is the surest way for you to actually offset your debt and to actually become financially free after 6 months. This brings us to the fourth technique, and that is the debt avalanche method. So as opposed to the debt snowball method, what this actually goes on to prescribe is that you offset the bigger loans first, or the bigger debts first, before you actually go on to focus on the smaller loans. And what this actually does is that it saves you more money, in that the bigger loans are more likely to attract higher interest rates as opposed to the smaller ones. And so offsetting the bigger loans ensures that you pay little in interest rates, and then at the end of the day, you're able to save more. And so try as much as possible and then sit down at this point and then ask yourself the simple question: which of these two techniques, that is the snowball method or the debt avalanche method, is very effective or efficient for me to offset my debt? Now, only you can be able to make that decision. And that is why it is necessary for you to actually look at your finances, look at your expenditure, and then more importantly, consider what is coming in the form of income. This brings us to the fifth technique, and that is to increase your income. But this is not easy. It's easier said than done. On average, the average multimillionaire has got at least 7 streams of income, and that is not an easy thing for you to achieve. However, what you can simply do is to ask yourself the simple question: what are the experiences or the skill set that I have currently that people would pay me to either teach them or to actually get things done on their behalf? And that is one of the surest ways for you to actually diversify your income streams. So you can list on freelancing apps, or probably even start a YouTube channel and start sharing these skill sets or the experiences that you've had in the past. And that would also serve as another income stream, and then subsequently ensure that you're empowered or you are able to diversify your income streams and more, and then also offset your debts at the end of the period. This brings us to the SIT technique, and that is to build an emergency fund. So an emergency fund is any fund that is able to cover anywhere between 1 and 6 months of your living expenses. So according to recent research, about 40% of all living Americans do not have an emergency fund, in that they do not have anywhere between $500 and then $1,000 saved to take care of any emergency or any unforeseen circumstance in the near future. And so the best way for you to actually ensure that you're able to offset your loans or to offset your debt and then also contribute towards your financial freedom is to build an emergency fund. Try as much as possible and then set aside some fund which would actually serve as a fallback in times of need. This brings us to the 7th and the last technique, and that is to avoid lifestyle creep. So lifestyle creep is simply a situation where people tend to increase their expenses anytime that they increase their income. So one of the surest ways for you to actually miss your target and for you to miss your financial goals is to increase your expenses as income actually increases. And so what that simply means is that you need to avoid taking on any debt or any loans that would not eventually actually bring in any form of income in the near future, i.e. actually spending on liabilities in the guise of assets. And so living below your means is one of the surest ways to ensure that you have enough left to offset your loans and to become financially free at the end of the month. And so these are the 7 time tested principles or strategies that you can adopt in order to steer yourself towards financial freedom and then pay off your debt. Thank you for spending time with us, and see you in the next video.